are now joining us on Tennis Channel Inside In. Back again. We're into mid to late October. Who can say? But Gill Gross, always a pleasure. Host the Monday Match Analysis podcast and 3 on Tennis Channel. And also calling matches this week in Stockholm, calling the covers there, Gill. We're back. We're refreshed. We're wearing like tie-dye, I think, or teal.
Different shades of blue. We can let the people decide which shade is better. I've got like an aqua. You've got more of a regulation blue. But good to be back with you and good to be back in person. I feel like we've done the last couple on Zoom, but always good to be here in the most high-tech tennis podcast studio in the game.
High-tech. It's a lot of preparation for it. A lot goes into this. But no, it's good. I mean, and look, we do the remote stuff. It's fun. It's tough when the schedule is just grinding. This time of year is good to kind of reflect on how things have gone and see where we're headed. A lot of action in Shanghai to discuss. The women in Wuhan, we're going to get to that. But recording this a couple days after. The episode will go out exactly a week to the date that the Nadal announcement came down. And I know that's your wheelhouse. Yourself, Joel Drucker, Amy Lunder host the 3 podcasts. So before we get to everything that goes into his legacy and the impact, it's like a 3-pronged approach to this, right? There's the decision to retire, there's the accolades, and then there's the legacy and the impact. So the decision, I don't think a lot of us thought that this was a shocking decision. It seemed like reading the tea leaves that this was going to happen sooner rather than later. Ultimately, is that where you land, where it was probably going to happen this year?
I had an inkling that it was going to be Davis Cup. When it was announced that Rafa was playing Davis Cup, I had a feeling this was coming. And just because I noticed when Nadal pulled out of the U.S. Open, he did not say he was injured. When he pulled out of the Laver Cup, he did not say he was injured. And maybe it was that he just didn't want to divulge certain things about his body, or he found it tiresome to continue to say, this is injured, that's injured. Now, I could understand that, but it wasn't clear that he was hurt. So I was thinking, it almost seems like he's just biding his time to make a decision about maybe whether or not he wants to play in 2025. But ultimately, the data that he received this year was pretty clear. He had a winning record, but he played some lengthy, difficult, close matches against players on red clay who he probably should have beaten more easily. And then he plays Zverev first round at Roland Garros. He plays Djokovic second round at the Olympics. They're tough draws, but the preparation for Rafa was there. He got the runway, he got the lead up, and ultimately he wasn't able to keep those matches competitive. So we know it takes so much for him right now to play because of what he has to go through for his body. What's going to make it worth it? And was there any chance that Rafa was going to reach a level of contending for the biggest titles ever again that was going to make all of that suffering and those hard yards worth it?
Those are the two points you highlighted are perfect. Is he ever going to get to a point? Can he, with his body, his age, all the miles, get to a point where he could contend? You have to weigh that as an athlete. And also the first thing you said, when you're an all-time great or just a great, when you start losing the guys that you know in the back of your mind, I had, maybe even not that difficultly had, that's going to weigh in there too. And look, there's no right or wrong time. We talk about this all the time. Like, there's no perfect scenario to walk out. But if 2025 would have been on his mind and he decided to play, and then what happens there? Like, he plays and loses even more matches to players he shouldn't have he shouldn't have lost to. So I think there's no right way to do this. It felt like time for all of us, and the fact that there is some poetry and some symmetry in the fact that the Davis Cup is in Spain, which you were one of the first people to highlight. Roland Garros Rafa, amazing, with Davis Cup Rafa right up there.
29-1. He lost.
He lost
in what, 2004 to Yuri Novak, and he hasn't lost since. Spain has won 5 Davis Cups in the Rafa era, which is incredible. I mean, he's an animal in Davis Cup.
2022 Roland Garros, winning that title, the last one that he won, the last major that he won, with the foot, with basically a numb foot the whole time, the preparation, that was the first time we got the details of what he had to do just to take the court. It doesn't, you're not going to get fresher as you get older. So it was a lot of miles. It was a lot of commitment. He obviously loves the game. And I believe that he thought about, what can I do to get back out there? But eventually, as time processes and time passes, he realized that this was the end of the road. And again, nothing wrong. Hats off to one of the all-time great sporting careers ever. But it does show you that this carousel just keeps going.
He said at the start of this year, I don't want to end my career in a press conference, and that's why I'm going to continue on, because I want to leave on my own terms in the sense that I'm playing tennis. And at the end of the day, the whole on your own terms thing, it's always been on shaky grounds because it means you have something left to give. Right. Did Roger leave on his own terms? Not really.
No.
Did Murray leave on his own terms? No. Is Rafa doing that right now? Not exactly.
And the flip side of that would be guys like, I would say, Pete Sampras, who left early, could have played a little more, maybe not won a major. Borg, of course, is a great one. Even Andy Roddick, who retires, probably had a couple years left of top 20 play, I would argue, but wants to go out when he does. And again, there's, like you said, there's no perfect time. You're either leaving too much in the tank or you're leaving not enough.
Yeah. And I'm a little bit relieved overall because I'm not in the business of making opinions on when players should retire. But if Rafa truly wanted to leave tennis without having to really end it on an injury, and ultimately, again, I don't think he is ending necessarily on an injury. He's ending after a clay court season where he was able to play it fully healthy. He didn't play the hard courts afterwards, and I'm not 100% clear. I don't think anybody is on exactly what the reason was, but he wasn't feeling up for it. But the point is, if he continued to play, it would have ended with an injury. It would have ended in a press conference. That's what Rafa didn't want. So a part of me is relieved that he set this finish line, and it has the makings to be a really great send-off, similar to the rewarding kind of punctuation mark that Roger had at Laver Cup.
Yeah, there's a lot to process in terms of Nadal saying goodbye and what the end is going to look like actually at the Davis Cup, but it is something I noted that all these all-time greats, the big four, they love playing for their country. That's another thing that binds them. It's maybe not the most talked about thing, but playing at the Davis Cup has always meant a lot to these guys. Rafa on his home soil to get to do it will be a tremendous honor. It'll be good to see him honored by, the generations that he kind of crossed with, because when you play this long, you start with some of the old-time guys, and now he's got to play with the Alcaraz generation too. So it'll be fun. It'll be an emotional send-off, but for Rafa, there's just so much about what he accomplished on the court. I would argue that 14 Roland Garros is up there for one of the most unbreakable records in sports. I don't know how you feel, but it's right there for me.
I agree. I definitely agree. I think it's more unbreakable than the overall slam record with, Novak 24 right now, where I feel the conditions of the modern game where players are playing for longer and competing on all three surfaces and playing all four slams, I think it makes it easier to rack up the majors. Like I can say right now, I think Alcaraz will pass Pete, right? However, 14 Roland Garros is, it's incomprehensible.
And the Alcaraz Pete thing is, we can obviously save that for a much, much later date. But for all these, the big three, what they were able to do major total, there will be a moment in all their careers, if it hasn't happened already, where they're going to get knocked off the horse. They're going to go a year or two without winning a major. What happens there? How do they rebuild their game? That's what really separates all three, was that all three of them were knocked off the pedestal and got back to number one, which is just remarkable stuff. But yeah, I think for Rafa, there's the off-the-court context of just how humble and how much grace and humility he had, but you also saw the duality of that on the court, because on the court he was as much of a killer as there was. And that's like the legacy, right? It's cliche to say, but no one fought harder for each individual point, for each individual match. He never really got down on himself. He never broke a racket. He was the textbook competitor, and I mean that in every sense of the word, how you handle yourself, how you compete, but also how you handle and process losses and get back to work the very next day.
I've never seen anyone, and I don't know that I ever will see anybody, play with that kind of energy. It was usually an 8 or a 9 out of 10 every single point without having those drop-offs, those dips, because there are some players who are highly emotional, who bring a high level of effort, but it fluctuates up and down and up and down. Rafa's just always there. He's never going away. Every single point, it's locked in, and it's beast mode, and it's a level of fight, it's a level of compete that it's deservedly so part of his legacy, because it's something that I think every tennis player basically strives for. Not that everybody is trying to emulate Rafa exactly in terms of on-court demeanor, but who doesn't play this game without having the goal of staying positive and competing really hard every single point.
Much easier said than done, too, as anyone
Way
that's picked
easier.
up a racket has seen. He never gave you anything. You had to earn every opportunity to beat him if it did come around, which wasn't much. And also, I mean, it goes without saying, too, 8 slams away from clay. That's more than a lot of all-time greats. So there was a notion erroneously earlier that it was like a clay court merchant situation, but especially later in his career, how he just was able to win on all surfaces was remarkable. And, you know, again, it goes without saying, there was a lot of opportunities to play majors that he didn't play in. A lot of it was, I think, how hard he played to have the career he did, but there is also that missed opportunity factor that's part of his story.
The missed opportunity factor.
Like not playing in a lot of events.
Yes.
That part.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I guess what I really take away from that is we all know, even if we weren't professional tennis players, how much rehab sucks. Is there anything worse than getting hurt and having to do stupid exercises on a table and stretches and all of that stuff? For Rafa to pick himself off the mat as many times as he did and to never let that affect his overall progression and development as a player is incredibly impressive. And one of Nadal's calling cards on the court was willingness to suffer. And there was a time in his career where that meant when we are on to the 30th ball of the rally, I'm still not going to bail out and go low percentage down the line. I'm going back cross court. I'm willing to suffer. It doesn't matter how much my legs are hurting. I think he also brought that to the process of recovering from injury and being willing to go through that process over and over again, leave no stone unturned, usually come back very much ready to contend right away. So there is the missed opportunity part of it. Now, at the same time, I don't think he gets like bonus points for getting hurt a lot.
No, it's part of the story. It's not that he would have, we're assuming he would have won these majors, but it is a thing that and I look at it like you said, like he pushed himself so hard that it, resulted in some injuries because of how hard he worked. And, 2022 Aussie Open stands out against Manarino. He's like frying in the sun, but refuses to back down, and remarkable. And every time, just the final note on that, Gill, is that every time he had an injury, he came back and started winning right again because he was in the top 10 the whole time. So the fact that he kept his ranking up was just remarkable stuff. Well, we'll let the experts on the 3 podcast expand on that, but I just wanted to, give Rafa his props. It's going to be an emotional time at the Davis Cup and another changing of the guard. This generation, this year especially, I feel like we've said goodbye to a lot. It'll continue in 2025. Gasquet among the names that announced out, but we're seeing quite a bit of retirements, unfortunately, part of the sport.
Yeah, no doubt. Team and Schwartzman and Shelby Rogers at the U.S. Open. Can you believe, though, that Gasquet and Nadal announced on the same day? There's a video on YouTube of Rafa and Richard playing at 13 years old at that junior tournament in France, Les Petits A. And you can go back and watch that, and it's incredible to watch this week. I put it, I tweeted it out because it's, Gasquet. Longevity is also something, and let's talk about that, right? As far as the injuries are concerned, most people thought that would ultimately mean that Rafa's career would be shorter. And he ended up being, Federer and Djokovic doing, having similar success into their 30s might have almost minimized the attention that this kind of deserves. But Rafa had a really, really fruitful 30s. And nobody thought that was ever going to be possible. He proved everybody wrong. And I think that's part of the story as well when it comes to his body.
Hats off again to Rafa Nadal, Gill Gross here on Tennis Channel Inside In. Well, turning our attention to the current action, I do want to say there is something to be said, though, about the fact that, Murray retires. Federer's been out a few years. Nadal retires. Djokovic is in another final. So, like watching the Shanghai Masters, thinking about it, I know he lost to Sinner, and we'll get to that on a tactical side in just a second, but Djokovic, after a break, coming back playing in a Masters final while all this is going on, while he's acknowledging that I'm like the last one left now. There's something to be said about that for sure.
100%. And the Olympics was the moment this year where you had Nadal and Djokovic across the net from each other, and you could see, wow, age is but a number, Mitch. They are 1 year apart, which is easy to forget. I think it always has been because Rafa came onto the scene earlier than Djokovic.
Debut major was 2003 Wimbledon.
Right.
That's when Rafa. That's insane. It's like an era ago.
Yes.
But yeah.
And then, Rafa was well into his major winning ways by 2011 when Djokovic already had won, but he hadn't begun to really rack them up. So Nadal has always felt older. In reality, he's only 1 year older. If you look at the bodies, the physical states, they are miles apart. Yeah. You want to talk about the Shanghai final?
I do. I think that, there's two ways to look at it. First, the winner, Jannik Sinner, again on hard court, just a staggering number. He's beaten everybody in the top, I think, 5 this year, except for the Alcaraz losses, just those matches. But how he plays on hard court, how the serve has gotten better, and you can break down the X's and O's much better than myself. But Djokovic, I thought, had a pretty good level, was in a lot of the points, was mixing some stuff up. But Sinner Sinner had one moment of weakness. I thought it was early. It was late in that first set when it was a 30-all down 4-5, and he just goes big and bold. But yet there are high percentage points. I was stunned by just how polished he's gone in 13 months. It's almost like a different guy to me. And there's no holes. There's nothing to poke at. Jannik Sinner is just a complete champion.
I was glad to hear Novak say after the match that Jannik kind of reminds him of himself, because that I'm seeing a total 180 in terms of Sinner's MO. And it's not that Jannik doesn't still obliterate the tennis ball, because he does. He is still a huge hitter. But that used to come at the expense of errors in a way that it simply does not anymore. Jannik has so much trust in his legs. Yeah. He is willing to do, the running and the defending. And he's actually, I think in terms of shot selection, extremely patient now. And he keeps the stat sheet very, very clean in terms of his errors. And he's still able to bludgeon the ball, but he picks his spots. And, we saw it against Fritz. He killed Fritz in the U.S. Open final in the errors category. So we are seeing Jannik have the utmost confidence in his fitness and his legs, and he's become so solid as a result.
There is nobody, and this is not an official stat, obviously, but there's nobody that cracks the ball that you're like, oh, this is going out, and then it catches the baseline more than Sinner. It happens like 4 or 5 times a match. But I do think that there's something to be said about, your points there, that he's playing clean tennis. It just looks like he's going for more, but that's how his game is right now. And look, on the Novak side, Gill, I thought there was a lot of questions coming in. He hadn't played a meaningful match in a very long time. He looked refreshed. He's enjoying this stage of his career. The level was great. He beats Fritz again. He gets to the final. And I thought the best part about Novak's game consistently is I'm going to stay in every rally. I'm going to change up my tactics. I'm going to try to get this back in my favor. He was fighting to the bitter end, but I want to know your perspective on the level we saw the whole tournament, and then especially in the final, playing the number 1 player in the world.
Djokovic surprised me last week. I was not expecting much at all. I mean, we didn't have much to go off of in a post-gold medal era. All we had was 3 matches at the U.S. Open, and he didn't look right in any of them. And he said he didn't feel prepared. He said that at the Davis Cup, which suggests that he probably, after taking the victory lap, so well-deserved, after winning gold.
Long party. Long victory
probably
lap.
Too long. Like he maybe went an extra lap too long, and it cost him at the U.S. Open. At least that's what I discern from Novak's own comments. Now he says, okay, I'm focused on representing my country, and I'm focused on prioritizing the slams. Well, you know what time of year we're in. There's no slams ahead. So I just wasn't sure what we'd get from Djokovic motivationally. But it was a reminder that, one, his skills go a very long way nowadays. Shanghai is one of the fastest playing surfaces on the tour. Novak's serve and his forehand are deadly, deadly weapons. They were firing here, unlike at the U.S. Open. And mentally, he was locked in enough, I think, especially against Fritz, to put in a big physical effort. Now, in the final, Mitch, I thought he played great in the first set. I thought in the second, he was knackered. And I didn't think he was there in the second set. I
definitely in the first few games, he came out a little flat. I think that's safe to say.
Yeah. To me, a pretty significant level dip in the second set. And the tennis probably caught up with him. And I don't think, I think Sinner Sinner people almost sometimes they take that the wrong way, like you're taking credit away from Jannik. But I don't think that Sinner necessarily would have needed Djokovic's level to dip, but it did in the second set. Why? Well, it might have been in terms of the rigorous training and the lead up or lack thereof for Djokovic.
Yeah.
But also, players say all the time, you got to play matches.
Well, that's a great point, because I questioned with the match reps, and the reality is Novak probably doesn't need match reps against 98% of the tour to really not overcome it. This would be the other 2%, Jannik Sinner.
Sure, but yes, and the experience of playing 4 matches in a row, 4 matches in 5 days.
No easy ones in there too. I mean, there might, okay, was it Cavalli was an easier one.
Yeah.
But Mickelson was tough right out of the gate. Yep. So it wasn't like he had just a free runway. You know, he was getting pushed, and Mensik took a set there. The Fritz side, though, that's 0-10 now. And do you see that as tactically there's things that could change, or just one guy better than the other, respectfully?
Well, both.
Okay.
Fritz has been very reluctant to change his tactics in that matchup. I mean, and I think we're starting to see it more. At the Australian Open this year, I was pretty pleased with how Taylor played that match in terms of what he was trying to do. Yeah. But Fritz, and I spoke to Taylor right before he played the quarterfinal against Novak at the U.S. Open last year. And I asked him straight up, is this a situation where you have confidence in your game and you go out there and just play your game, or you look at Novak and say, this guy is different, this guy has beaten me every single time, I'm going to change something? And he told me, no, it's more about playing my game. I need to trust what I do best.
It is so tough because playing his game got him to where he is.
Yes.
And I get it. And there's very few people that can relate to that because of how good and special he is. But when you get to that level and you find, it's like the Charles Barkley, Michael Jordan 93 finals, like finally I came up to someone that was like, this guy's better than me.
Sure.
And it's tough. But that again was a match where you're talking second set tiebreaker, set point right there. The margins are so thin in this sport. And eventually it just came down to, again, the same guy winning. Not a coincidence if it happens 10 straight times.
Right. And it's tough because Fritz brings a lot of baseline consistency and a lot of kind of linear baseline power, and obviously the big serve. Djokovic soaks all of that up better than anybody ever has. I guess, yeah, I mean, the tough thing for Taylor is if there was ever going to be a circumstance where he was going to get the better of Novak, it would have been in that Shanghai semifinal. But yeah, he was right there.
Yeah, he certainly was. Well, you know, for Sinner, he already clinched his year in number 1 and third fastest. Only Nadal 1 year and Djokovic 1 year. I think it was Nadal 2010, Joker 15. Were the only players to clinch year on number 1 faster than Sinner. So that's the kind of year he's had. Just incredible.
It's kind of underrated, and I know maybe part of that is because there is going to be a segment of the population who, regardless of what the ITIA said, is going to kind of take something away from Jannik. But the season he's having is probably underrated right now. If you look at how few players have ever won 90% of their matches over the course of a year, Jannik's at 92% for his win rate. He's won 2 majors.
If he flips one of those probably first 2, obviously the second one at RG, one of those Alcaraz matches, we're having an entirely different conversation about an all-time great year, but it's in the conversation for sure. And yeah, the outside noise, and there's still a lot, and we're going to, see how it plays out. Everyone has their opinion on it, but just the ability to take the court while that's going on and still have that level is, I think, commendable in my opinion. So.
Yeah. No, there's definitely some compartmentalization. That said, it's almost a what if, because Darren Cahill has said, and Jannik has said, that in terms of his energy and his personality and how he's feeling on the court, the doping stuff has affected him.
Yeah.
So
how could it not? Like that's
right. If he says it's affected him, and I believe him, and he's played this well, he's had this good a year, and there were a lot of physical issues in the middle of the year. If you look at clay court season and grass court season, a lot of those losses were physical malfunctions by Jannik.
Right.
You almost think, man, how good could this 2024 have been?
Crazy stuff there. The last thing on Shanghai, Thomas Mahach, a great breakthrough run, beats Alcaraz. Sinner, plays him pretty tough. Where are we at What are your opinions on his game and his potential? Is this a flash in the pan at this level, or could there be some real Mahach buzz going into 2025?
There have been multiple times this year where I've watched Mahach, and the first time was at the Australian Open against Francis Tiafoe.
Heck yeah.
I've watched Mahach, and I have said, holy.
Yeah.
Blank. I mean,
yeah.
Like, there is a peak kind of red line level that he's capable of that is outstanding. And he showed it mostly the entire match against Alcaraz, where he did exactly what I think you need to do against Carlos, which is attack, attack, attack. Do not give him time. Do not let him set his feet. Just suffocate and get on top of him, which I don't think Sinner did enough in Beijing. That's another story, right? But Mahach did that. I've never seen him hit his forehand so big. The concern for Tomas is on a slower surface, unlike Shanghai.
Yeah.
Does the serve have enough speed?
Right.
Does the forehand have enough penetration? And that's where, sometimes it can seem hard for him because the points don't come very easy. But his two-handed backhand, especially at his size, is an absolute weapon. And I love the way he comes forward. His net rushing reminds me a little bit of Alcaraz in the sense he uses his speed and his athleticism in a pretty small frame to close in on the net and just kind of use his hands and his athleticism in a way that makes his transition game really excellent.
112, I think he hit a forehand, that jumping forehand against Sinner. It was remarkable. Yeah, pound for pound, strikes the ball. Heck of a year for him. Olympics, the short stuff, and now this result. So, yeah. Hope he keeps it going. More with Gill Gross here as we wind down this episode of Tennis Channel Inside In. Talking about the women's game now. Wuhan had their event, and Sabalenka is just undefeated. Just cannot lose in Wuhan. Beats a very game local girl in Zhang Qinwen in the final in 3 sets, but it's another example of Sabalenka in this tournament, but also on hard courts the year she's having, Gill. It's rounding into form that she will be taking back that #1 ranking, and it's deserved. She's been the best player this year. It's been remarkable, especially on the hard courts, to watch her strike the ball.
It has, right? I mean, Jannik Sinner won the title this week, so Sabalenka was going to match. I mean,
funny.
when one of them wins a title, that it's a package deal. Obviously, we saw that at the U.S. Open, and we saw that at the Australian Open. Sabalenka has achieved a level of consistency that I think has been pretty well documented over the last 2 years, despite her play style. And there's no one you trust more on a hard court right now, not even close. And she's able to overwhelm basically everyone at the moment with her power, and there's very little that goes wrong,
except for maybe one person. Carolina Mukova is the only one.
That's true.
But no, I think that the consistency, I'll admit it, I didn't think this level was possible given where we were a couple years ago, but she's found a way and she bounces back. If she has a bad set, she'll bounce right back and reset it. It's very, very mature how she's become such a champion.
Well, look, it's not emotional anymore.
No,
for Sabalenka, it used to be a roller coaster, and you could say, oh, it's because she's aggressive. But, at the core of that was a mentality that was volatile, right? It was, there were big time ups and downs. It was exactly what I was saying we don't see with Rafa. Now it's, she knows how she needs to play, and that's the right style for her based on what her attributes are. But she's going to come in to every single point with the same mindset. And obviously there have been, I think, changes to her forehand that have been a little bit underlooked because of the second serve getting better and patching up, but she gets more rotation on her forehand. What I really like about her now, and this is a Paul Annacone favorite, aggressive shots into big targets. Sabalenka is the biggest hitter on tour by far, but she used to kind of
just go line or
she's trying to paint lines. She's trying to pick corners. It's like, Aryna, you're hitting the ball 85 miles per hour. You don't need to hit it into the corner. So I think she started to understand that with her power, it has a rushing effect. It has an overwhelming effect on her opponents on the other side of the net that renders it unnecessary to hit to dangerous targets.
Very impressive there. The other notes I have from Wuhan, the finalist, Zhang Qinwen, she's just a little spicy. I had that written down because we've seen a couple of times now where it's arguing with a player, yelling at a player's box, a lines person. And look, I'm not going to defend or rip on all these incidents. There's a lot of different ones, and they're all in their own context. But she's definitely got some spice out there. It was unfortunate she can't get that big win over Sabalenka, but I know she's a gamer and she's going to just keep competing based on what I saw.
I'm going to do the kind of removed journalist perspective here. Tremendous to see contrast in personality. And there's nothing better than to get a little bit of rivalry. And, you know, you and I, we're okay with some bad blood here and there. And if Zhang is going to produce it in a way that's not, you know, nothing is morally reprehensible, right? No. There's not, honestly, she has not crossed certain lines that other players have crossed that I think are more concerning. But like, I'll give you an example. And this in a lot of ways is more extreme, and it's not apples to apples here. But this week it came out that Nick Kyrgios is coming back in 2025, and he's expected to play the Australian Open. Is there a bigger match in tennis right now outside of Sinner Alcaraz or something with Djokovic than just Sinner Kyrgios? Like, people lie to themselves, and because people lie to themselves about how much this moves the needle.
It's true. It's also, okay, so when there's an incident of like a serve violation and a player gets mad and yells, fans love that. They love seeing the drama of confrontation, you know. They don't want to maybe see a match be determined as a result of that, but anytime and that's the argument that our friend and our colleague Mark Pecci brings up, is why one of the reasons why he doesn't want to just go completely electronic is you like that human interaction. I'm just saying that to bring up that I agree. Like, we're all into drama, and you know, the Kyrgios side of it has a lot of layers to it, but I get it. Like, drama is a part of why people watch sports.
People who say they aren't into drama, I think, are mainly lying, because what they're actually saying is, I dislike drama to the point where I will begin to root against a player who incites drama.
Like, if you're a Carlos Alcaraz fan, as there are many of, and yes, winning in straight sets in a major is great and awesome, but those 5-set thrillers are what we remember and we talk about. Like, oh, it was so back and forth, they pulled it out at the end. Like, and that's kind of, you know, it's not the best example, but I say that we like classic matches more than beatdowns, even if it is our favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the tennis rules at the end of the day. So I think you can be as dramatic as you want to be. If you're 120 in the world, you're not going to be a superstar. It doesn't matter how much drama or, you know, tension you bring to the table, right?
Yeah.
But I do think that in the case of Zhang, who has a absolutely fascinating game to watch, there is so much power there. She has one of the higher RPM forehands with the extreme grit, but she combines it with truly impressive movement. She's doing things with her return position that I haven't seen any woman do ever.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, kind of a men's like return position, which I think is adding new dimensions and new geometry to the game.
Yeah.
And then, you know, she has a serve that I think is going to be really interesting to watch in the coming years, because
for sure,
it's one of the lowest percentage serves on the tour, yet she basically leads the tour in aces. So if you're Zhang Qinwen's coach, do you want to change this to try to make it more consistent? Or are we saying, I'm not touching it, you're hitting so many aces right now, I'm not changing a thing?
I can't wait to see, because I want, you know, with Iga, and we know there's the coaching side of things, and Sabalenka at the top, Coco, who I should point out, I mean, 21 double faults was tough. It's kind of a roller coaster that we've been on with her, but we know that her floor is so high that she can continue to overcome and wins a premier event in Beijing. But, you know, Qinwen, Coco, Iga, we've got some depth at the top, but Sabalenka has put the target squarely on her back. Like, this is my reign right now. Someone's going to have to knock me off the mantle. Yeah.
The margins are tiny in this game, as we know. One of the best things to tell all young players, and everybody should know this, the best players in the world win 52% of the points over the course of a year, which means you really can't do any better than 52%. You're going to lose 48. So if you look at the kind of numbers that Goff is double faulting at, a rate well above 5% of the points, there's something to be said there for an opportunity for real growth there. And it would make a difference. Sometimes we overemphasize double faults, but it really would make a difference if she cleaned that up.
You bring up one thing, and I can tie it all together like this. And I don't want to rip on him. I said last week on the show, we like takes, we like opinions and content. But the Mats Wilander quote about, the Sinner Alcaraz level exceeding any level that we've seen in tennis, Big Three included. Again, everyone has their opinion. There's certain truths to what we all say and what we all can interpret. I would just say that stat you said about 52% of points and watching a Djokovic run in Shanghai, it's not all about level winning it. It's about knowing when to go for your spots, how to strategize out there. It's not just who hits it the biggest, who hits it the fastest. So that was my point, is that even if the level is a little better, when you put an all-time great or put any great player in a situation where they can use their mind too, it can tell maybe even a bigger story.
That's a great point, and I agree. However, I did not agree with Wilander. To me, I am not picking Alcaraz or Sinner in a match right now against prime Roger, Rafa, or Novak. I did think the reaction was completely oversized in the sense that we're talking about similar leagues here. We're talking about players dominating the sport. And in general, and I don't know if you're talking about the raw level factor, in which case Benoit Paire would beat Bjorn Borg. I don't know if we're going like that or if we're saying relative level. Because if we're not saying relative level, you do need to acknowledge, I think everybody needs to acknowledge that, the game, as far as we've gone so far, it's going to keep getting better.
It's every sport. And that's, and I understand that. It's all relative for sure. I was just saying that even if the level is better, that doesn't tell the whole story. That doesn't tell the story of a break point.
It's a great
break point when, lastly, as we kind of round this down, Gill Gross calling the matches in Stockholm. We still got tennis all around the globe. We've got some WTA action in Japan. We've got this big Stockholm event. I love the acoustics. We were talking about that. It's kind of nice to have a different setup there. But anything we should be paying attention to in that tournament?
Well, you have Alexander Blocks in Antwerp. So Belgium is going to have a real player here. In Alexander Blocks, I believe. I haven't watched a ton of him to the point where I'm super confident breaking it all down, but I know that hopes are very high for him. The race is mainly a Stockholm thing this week. You have Ruud in the mix. You have a few players. Who's 11? Tommy Paul is in the mix.
Former champion there.
Yeah, and then there's one other. Oh, Rublev. So Rublev, Ruud, and Tommy Paul all in Stockholm, sort of in that 7 through 11 range in the race. So that'll be good.
Yeah, I think this tournament, especially this time of year, you're seeing not just the race, but the players that are trying to maybe get that first title, work their way up the rankings. Also, Marco Scarone, 100th tour level win.
Yeah.
Only 6 active Americans have done that, so I want to give him a shout out. A nice year for him, too. So I think, especially on the men's side, going into these events, we still have more of the meat of the schedule left. You've got Basel next week. You've got Vienna. And it's Paris. Bercy is a lot of people's favorite tournaments coming up.
What do you mean favorite?
I think a lot of people enjoy. I'll put it this way. The crowd there is one of the best environments, I think.
Okay.
Even if you don't like it, even if you're Daniil Medvedev. So I'll say that. That's a tournament that Djokovic loves to play too. And it's where Holger Rune, who hasn't had the best of times this year, but had his breakout party. So
yeah. No, it's true. And it's the only indoor hardcourt Masters 1000, and there should be one of them. I'll point out that Stockholm, look out for a first-time champion. Denis Shapovalov won his first ever title there. Stefanos Tsitsipas did. Tommy Paul did. It has been a very happy hunting ground for players looking to nab their first.
And, I was going to say, you broke the news too. Was it you broke the news that Sonego is a singer too? I heard that on the broadcast.
Yeah, I did. I felt the need to bring that up at some point in time, just because. Look, it's hard to be an independent artist these days, right? Yeah. I got to get them those Spotify streams. I hear the revenue split there isn't always isn't always easy to kind of build up. So,
well, any other final thoughts, or I guess early players that are on your radar going into next year? You're pretty good about nailing that.
One final thought. Okay. One final thought, and then we can get to players. We talk about Fritz and the tactics against Djokovic, and the one thing is we get so wrapped up into talking about what a player maybe should do or should try. We talk about all these tactics that maybe they should attempt. Skills rule at the end of the day. Nobody has original ideas of what to do. So for example, when Taylor Fritz, and this is getting better and better and better, when he didn't go to the net against Lorenzo Musetti at Wimbledon at all, and he struggled to get to the net against Jannik Sinner at the U.S. Open, the root cause of that is the level that he has the ability to volley and the confidence he has in his ability to transition. So I just think that it all comes down to options.
Yeah.
And in terms of, if you're a player and you're coming into a matchup, let's say against Djokovic, there's so much discourse all the time about why don't you try this and why don't you try that? It usually comes down to how much skill do you have?
It's Victor Troitsky way back when someone said that, just putting his racket up, like, you want to come down here and do this? But, yeah. No, I get it. It's a good point. Skill wise, it's like they're all these players are giving their best. They're playing against the all-time greats and the best in the sport right now. So I cut them more slack than most, and I would encourage people to do the same. But exciting stuff. Oh yeah, out the door, any players to look out for?
Yeah. So I did a draft on my podcast with Alex Gruskin about the best players 23 or under, other than Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner. My number one overall pick, and this was weeks ago before the Shanghai stuff, was Jakub Mensik. I'm all in, Mitch. All in.
Wow, that's a good one. Mensik's good. I'd say Fonseca maybe.
Fonseca was my second overall pick.
Yeah.
And then my opponent on the other side of the podcast took Jack Draper and Holger Rune, who are obviously more established, but they're both also 23 or under.
Going to be a fun race to figure that out. Gill Gross, you can catch him on the Monday Match Analysis podcast, especially on YouTube. Does great work there. And 3 podcasts with Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy, as well as calling matches at Stockholm at Tennis Channel this week. Gill, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on Tennis Channel Inside In.
Thanks, Mitch. Anytime. Always fun.